Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Two important laws go into effect this week in Texas. The state's historic Heartbeat Act, with the Supreme Court's approval, may have set a model for the entire country. Are you aware of the true cost of the 20-year war in Afghanistan? You may not have felt its cost much because the government is financing it through debt instead of tax increases. And what does this even mean? Senator Joe Manchin finds himself increasingly at odds with his colleagues' sweeping $3.5 trillion spending plan. He doubled down on his position this week. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look at this week's highlights together. It's a golden time for college graduates looking for jobs. There's a national shortage of workers, and their starting salaries are at an all-time high. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, the average starting salary for the class of 2020 was over $55,000. The NACE's Summer 2021 Salary Survey shows that the new average climbed 2.5% above 2019, a gain of nearly 9% if you compare it to 2018's numbers. Technical majors were the highest paid among bachelor graduates last year. From high to low, the top paid majors in 2020 were petroleum engineering, computer programming, computer engineering, and computer science, all with an average starting salary above $80,000, excluding bonuses. The NACE's executive director suggests, in some cases, salary increases most likely reflect unique times. The higher demand for nurses as frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic may have partly fueled the increase in average starting salaries for registered nursing majors. There has been a national shortage of nurses in the wake of the coronavirus. The increase in starting salaries for college graduates may be a reflection of a general work shortage across the country. July's job report by the National Federation of Independent Businesses found that almost half of the time, small business owners couldn't fill vacancies. This is a 48-year high. Historically, the average rate of unfilled job openings is only about 1 in 5. A big event that happened this week is, of course, the end of the 20-year war in Afghanistan. The last U.S. military flight left Kabul at around 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, August 30th. The White House and the State Department said between 100 to 200 Americans were left behind, while the Pentagon said it doesn't know about the number. Neither the withdrawal or the war itself was close to a success. If you want to categorize it as a failure, you actually have many reasons to do so. But today, we want to address the cost of the wars from the 9/11 attacks. In September 2002, the Bush administration said the war against Iraq would cost as much as $200 billion. As it turns out, that wouldn't even cover half the interest payments. Brown University launched a cost of war project about 10 years ago to study perceived shortfalls in how the government measures the toll of war has taken on the United States. The total budgetary cost and future obligations of the post-9/11 wars are about $8 trillion. That includes more than $2 trillion spent by the Defense Department, $1 trillion in interest payments, about evenly split between the Iraq and Afghan conflicts, and more than $2 trillion on future healthcare obligations through 2050. America has spent more than $2 trillion on the Afghanistan war. That's $300 million a day for 2 decades. The human cost is close to 1 million people killed in those terror wars, including more than 7,000 U.S. service members, over 200,000 local national military and police, close to 390,000 civilians, and 300,000 opposition fighters. Note that more civilians were killed than the terrorist fighters. The rest are mostly allied troops, journalists, and humanitarian aid workers. Both the human and financial cost estimates in the study are conservative figures. The aftermath effect of wars such as water loss and war-related diseases weren't even taken into account. $8 trillion is a figure too far-fetched for people to contemplate. But if you really want to visualize it, there is one way. According to Professor Linda Bilmes from Harvard, who has spearheaded work on calculating the financial cost, if you were to take $1,000 bills and stack them, $1 million would be 4.3 inches high. Now, $1 billion would be 360 feet high, which is about the height of the Statue of Liberty. Now, $1 trillion would be 67 miles high, and $8 trillion would be over 500 miles, about half the length of the California coast. Now remember, you're using $1,000 bills, not $100 bills. The reason that you haven't felt this cost is because the war has been financed through debt instead of taxation. The government borrowed the money to fight the wars, and Americans will be paying the interest for decades to come. And where are we right now? The cost of war study says American taxpayers have already covered close to $1 trillion in interest payments. Had the U.S. pulled out last year, the interest payments on the war would have been $2 trillion by 2030 and $6.4 trillion by 2050. However, most Americans actually pay lower taxes now than before these wars started. Bilm said, if voters don't think about how they are paying for that, it's easy to continue wars for a long time. Interest rates have also been at a near record low since the 2008 financial crisis, allowing the government to continue financing the war on terror through debt. If rates rise to historic levels like 5.5%, the amount of interest and future healthcare costs could explode. Bilm suspects the government might default on its obligation to veterans if that happens. The Cost of War study warns if Americans don't come to terms with the true consequences of such wars, the nation risks entering another endless battle. The European Union's version of the CDC announced on September 2nd that there's no urgent need to have COVID-19 vaccine booster shots. The EU agency said current evidence does not indicate fully vaccinated individuals would need another dose. Additional doses should already be considered for people with severely weakened immune systems. This is different from what federal health agencies have told the public. Last week, health officials from the CDC and FDA pushed COVID-19 vaccine booster shots and September 20th as the deadline. As booster shots are being rolled out, people raised concern that the extra dose would shift the definition of what it means to be fully vaccinated. In Israel, one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, health officials recently declared the individuals who have received 3 doses, not 2, are fully vaccinated. Holders of Israel vaccine passports have to get a 3rd dose of the Pfizer vaccine within 6 months of their 2nd shot, or they could lose their vaccinated status. The famous Democrat centrist Senator Joe Manchin has riled his Democrat colleagues. He called on Congress to halt spending the $3.5 trillion on its socialist agenda. Manchin made the remarks on September 1st at the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce annual business summit. He said given what the country is facing right now, inflation, new waves of the coronavirus, and the bungled Afghan war exit, he would ask his colleagues and all of the Senate to hit the pause button on the $3.5 trillion. Fully aware of the tension his position may create with the Democratic Party, Manchin said, quote, "I know they're going to go nuts right now because what I said is going to all my caucus in Washington, but I'm thinking of it from a standpoint of where we are as a nation today." He doubled down in a Wall Street Journal commentary on Thursday titled, "Why I Won't Support Spending Another $3.5 trillion. He said, while the nation faces unprecedented array of challenges and will inevitably encounter additional crises in the future, some Congress members, quote, "have a strange belief there is an infinite supply of money to deal with any current or future crisis, and that spending trillions upon trillions will have no negative consequences for the future. I disagree." The major concerns Manchin has against the big spending plan are around inflation, the record high national debt, and the consequences of adding another several $trillion on top of it. He described the $3.5 trillion figure as artificial and said, regardless of political party, elected leaders are sent to Washington to make tough decisions and not simply go along to get along. I, for one, won't support a $3.5 trillion bill or anywhere near that level of additional spending without greater clarity about why Congress chooses to ignore the serious effect inflation and debt have on existing government programs. With Manchin's strong opposition to Democrats' top socialist agenda, their big budget reconciliation plan may very well get stranded. And coming up, we have California Church being awarded attorney's fees in a court case, and a big week for Texas. Governor Greg Abbott signs a Second Amendment law and a pro-life law. But before we continue, I just want to say thank you for everyone's continued support. With censorship being extremely inundating, it's more important that everyone that is watching the show takes the time to share this video so that we can get truthful information to our friends and family. And you can also help the Eye Opener team with our mission to deliver truthful news by donating to the show or purchasing a mug that matters. You can find the link in the description below, and your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. Salute. The California government has agreed to pay $800,000 in attorney fees to Grace Community Church in Los Angeles. The move comes after state and federal courts banned California government officials from ever again imposing discriminatory restrictions on houses of worship. The settlement is noteworthy. In America, it's very rare for unsuccessful litigants to pay their opponents' legal fees, even when their cases are weak. The Grace Community Church is a popular Christian megachurch in the community. But beginning in March last year, California and local governments initiated an overreaching response to combat the coronavirus. Officials repeatedly tried to shut down in-person church attendance after the pandemic started. To reclaim people's rights to worship and their First Amendment rights, Grace Church and Pastor John MacArthur sued the government. National public interest law firm, the Thomas More Society, represented the plaintiffs. On Tuesday, the Board of Supervisors of Los Angeles County voted to approve the settlement with Grace Community Church and MacArthur. Under the agreement, the county and the state of California will split the $800,000 evenly as compensation for the plaintiffs' attorney fees. However, it appears to be a no choice for the government officials. Had they refused to accept the settlement, the courts would most likely have ordered them to pay a larger amount. The law firm said in civil rights cases, a prevailing plaintiff who vindicates a constitutional right is entitled to an award of fees. It encourages people to bring forward merit-based cases that defend their constitutional rights. The Thomas More Society said they will use the $800,000 to help underwrite other legal cases. What a week for Texas. Two important laws went into effect on Wednesday, September 1st. One law is the pro-Second Amendment constitutional carry. Starting this past Wednesday, anyone above the age of 21 is able to carry handguns openly, in holsters, or concealed without a license or training. Governor Greg Abbott signed constitutional carry into law earlier this year as part of a series of pro-gun bills that keep firearms in the hands of law-abiding citizens. The policy represents the biggest win for gun rights in the history of Texas. Currently, there are 21 constitutional carry states, and 5 of them, Utah, Montana, Iowa, Tennessee, and Texas, restored the rights this year. The other law that went into effect on Wednesday is the pro-life bill, known as the Texas Heartbeat Act. The new law prohibits abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected, making it one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the United States. Private citizens can also sue abortion providers or anyone who facilitates an abortion in the state. The person who successfully brings a lawsuit will get paid $10,000 from each defendant for each abortion involved. As expected, abortion providers tried everything they could to prevent the legislation from taking effect. They filed an emergency request to the Supreme Court to block the law. What wasn't clear was how the Supreme Court would rule. In a deeply divided decision, a vote of 5-4, the High Court denied the request for more than 20 abortion providers and kept the law intact. Although Chief Justice John Roberts, who dissented with the 3 liberal justices, did point out that the decision cannot be understood as acknowledging the constitutionality of the Texas law. So what's the actual impact of the bill? How many abortions will the law prevent? A fetal heartbeat can be detected around 6 weeks. When Planned Parenthood sued Texas, its lawsuit said about 85 to 90% of the abortions occurred after 6 weeks. Preliminary estimates suggest that Texas law could prevent roughly 130 procedures per day, or 4,000 per month, or 50,000 per year. So as many as 50,000 lives could be saved in Texas every single year. With the Supreme Court decision, more conservative-controlled states recognize the Texas law as a model for themselves. At least 6 states, Mississippi, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, said they plan to introduce similar bills. Republican State Senator Chris McDaniel from Mississippi said he would absolutely consider filing legislation to match the Texas law. He said most conservative states in the South will look at the Supreme Court's inaction as an opportunity to advance restrictions on abortion. Yet abortion is one of the most controversial issues in American politics. We briefly discussed this yesterday. Although laws are a legal means to resolve a particular case, they cannot solve the ideological differences between the liberals and the conservatives. Conservatives view abortion as a moral issue. After all, what's the difference between an unborn and a born child? If you cannot harm a human being, would you end someone's life in a mother's womb? If you're a Christian or Catholic, abortion is strictly prohibited. However, religious doctrine can't even restrain progressive Christians nowadays. We have politicians who openly claim they are pro-abortion Catholics. They actually use the word pro-choice instead of pro-abortion. The left emphasizes abortion is women's rights, women's reproduction rights, and health care, pushing people to think it's an issue related to individual liberty and freedom. They want women to want to fight for their rights. But think about it. A child is an independent human life. If we can pull people back to the same moral understanding of the problem, more than just the interpretation of the Constitution and law, we probably can address the issue much better and quell the controversy one day. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out the playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can also join me on our Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on YouMaker, Gab, Parler, and Getter. I would like to thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time.